This is a clip from one of our recent live streams. We stream live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. As a reminder, this is our second channel, Fish the Moment Live. Our main channel, Fish the Moment, is where we have all of our highly edited YouTube content. We spend 30 to 40 hours a week producing one YouTube video that's posted on the Fish the Moment channel every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. These videos include on-the-water footage of us actually fishing, as well as detailed instruction on how to use electronics, fish offshore, and a lot of other great information. Make sure to check out the Fish the Moment channel if you enjoy the content on this channel. We're live. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to our Fish the Moment live stream. Tonight, we're joined by Randy Blockett, and we're going to be breaking down the winning pattern at the 2021 Bassmaster Classic on Ray Roberts Lake. Pretty cool event there, Randy. Summertime Classic, first one in a very long time. We had high water, so it wasn't a traditional summertime classic. Didn't see a ton of offshore fishing, especially from the top guys, but we have flood water conditions, and I know that's one of your favorite ways to catch them in the whole world, flipping shallow bushes.
Oh man, I'd love to have been in that classic. They hit it just perfect, just a freak deal. June having water up in the bushes, and I think a lot of guys were probably disappointed because I know there are a lot of anglers in that tournament that were really looking forward to that March event, and when they had to reschedule it to June, that took about half the field out of it. And it was sort of what I expected weight wise and how the fish were caught. But you don't see many classics where you're flipping bushes in the summertime. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, it's a kind of a cool deal and exciting to kind of break it down for you guys. We're going to talk about the baits, the areas, got some really good footage from Bassmaster, some photos and stuff to share with you guys. So hopefully we're going to be able to break it down for you all the way. Also have some news to share as well beforehand. So it's going to be an information-packed episode. But first things first, Randy, I have to kind of brag a little bit because the Fish the Moment podcast, we've made it big time. We have our first official sponsor. Right down here, you can see our title sponsor, Bridgeford Foods. Super excited to get Bridgeford to sponsor the podcast. We're going to be rocking some Sweet Baby Ray's beef jerky on the stream tonight. You're going to see me kind of snacking on that. Honestly, Randy, I've been buying Bridgeford stuff constantly ever since I started fishing with you a year ago, and I just buy it from the store myself. So this is my personal beef jerky, my personal pepperoni. I make this in my omelet every morning. I also bring it on the lake to make with like crackers and cheese and stuff. I'm addicted. My wife is addicted to the Bridgeford beef jerky. It's just such a great snack take on the boat. So it's really cool to be able to be promoting Bridgeford on the podcast. It's a product that I believe in. I've been literally using it nonstop while we've been fishing and stealing some from your boat whenever I can. And guys, if you want to help support the podcast, definitely go support our first title sponsor, our only sponsor right now, which is Bridgeford Foods. So huge shout out to Bridgeford for supporting the podcast, and thanks you, Randy, for kind of helping get that relationship started for us.
That stuff is really addictive. I've been up to the plant, touring the plant, how they make that jerky, and guys, it's unbelievable. The beef that they use in that jerky, they come in, they're like big roasts, and they look like you want to put them on the grill. The actual, the meat that they use, you just can't get a higher grade piece of beef. And I saw, the containers of the beef that they use for the jerky. And like I said, I wanted to put it on my grill and roast it. It was unbelievable. So it's high quality for sure, man.
Yeah, my wife will not eat any other jerky. We've bought like a bunch of different ones. We'll get like Jack Links or other stuff, and like she's like, it's too tough. This stuff is like soft. It's so nice. I love this jerky. My wife, I'm serious, she's like addicted to this stuff. Randy, you would give her like a bag, and she's like halfway through with it before we even launch the boat every morning. So pretty excited to be working with Bridgeford. You guys will be hearing us talking about that as we go through. I'm not familiar with doing podcast sponsorships, so we're going to do the best we can. Hopefully you guys are going to enjoy. Hopefully it's not too obnoxious, but I'm very proud right now. We made it big time, Randy. I'm very excited. We're talking about the classics. So Hank Cherry won back-to-back Bassmaster Classics. That's kind of wild. Crazy because it's different times of the year. Kind of both weird classics in terms of where they were falling and everything. And he just kind of grinded it out. And what I thought was interesting in both this, Randy, we'll get into it, is that Hank was catching fish in very similar areas to everyone else, but he was just out fishing his competitors using different approaches, different baits, things like that. That's at least how it seemed to me. He wasn't doing anything that was necessarily different from a structure or cover perspective, but he was kind of out fishing those around him. Now, I didn't watch all the coverage. I was in the expo the entire weekend, so I did see he was throwing some stuff, some jerk baits on riprap and doing some a little bit of offshore stuff. So I wasn't able to follow it exclusively, but I was able to follow a little bit here and there. So don't quote us on exactly what was going on. Randy wasn't able to check any of the live coverage either. So we're just going off of what Bassmaster is providing, giving our insight. If we're not 100%, we apologize. We were kind of busy this last weekend too with other stuff. So let's just jump straight into it here, Randy. And I'm just going to pull up some pictures. One thing that's awesome is I actually have some pictures of all the baits and stuff on Bassmaster.com. If you guys want to go check it out, go to Bassmaster.com and you can just go through all these articles and stuff. But basically, if you take a look, what Hank was saying he was catching him on was a half-ounce flipping jig and a prototype Berkeley Stunna jerkbait. So that's coming out in July. I know he was throwing a Vision 110 last year at the Classic. So this year, apparently he's come out with a new jerkbait for Berkeley that's not a Vision 110. So that's interesting. I know he was flipping earlier, or on the final day of the tournament. He actually went from that half-ounce jig and he dropped back down to a quarter-ounce sinker on the little, it looked like a Z-Craw from Zoom. I don't know exactly what he was fishing, but I think it may have been a Z-Craw, or he was flipping something with like a little quarter-ounce weight. And then I also saw him catch a few fish on a chatterbait. So he wasn't just fishing these two baits, he was throwing a variety of things. But the big thing, Randy, if we kind of take a look at the area he was fishing, here's his deal right here. He was fishing basically a peninsula or like a point that stuck out, and the bushes were flooded up. And whenever you have the lake super high, guys, this is a very common sight. You have these points, you have areas where the water sticks out, and then you're going to have water flooding into it. And this is kind of one of the areas I like to key on a lot, especially in the summertime, because what will happen is that if we take a look at this picture, and if I zoom in just a little bit, if you enjoy our videos and want a free and easy way to support the channel, head to our website, fishthemoment.com. Then head to the Support Fish the Moment page. Here you'll find our Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. If you click this link, then check out on Tackle Warehouse, we'll get a small percentage of your sales. The way this works is that we have a special link with Tackle Warehouse. So if you bookmark this link on your web browser and then click it every single time you visit Tackle Warehouse, you'll be supporting Fish the Moment with every bait you buy. Open this picture here. Here we go. So I'm just going to open up just a picture. If we take a look here, you can kind of see right here what we're looking at. So on the bank right here, you have water flooded very, very far back, way into these backwaters up into the fields. But this peninsula is sticking out. And when you have a peninsula sticking out like this, guys, or a point or whatever it is, water is going to be going all up around this, but the tops of the peninsula is only going to be in 3, 4, 5 foot of water. And here, a lot of shad were moving up to spawn. Because the water was high, the water was kind of fluctuating and stuff, those shad were spawning at different times. So you had a shad spawn going on in the morning, and then those shad would pull out of those bushes or away from those bushes later in the day and then pull up here in the morning to feed. So you kind of had a deal where you had a shad spawn going on, but you also had some bass that were kind of hanging out on this outer peninsula to ambush the shad they were moving in. Now, there were bass that were way back in these flooded trees and bushes and stuff, but it didn't seem like this sort of stuff was as productive, these very, very far back areas, as the areas that were kind of more towards the main lake, sticking out into the middle of the lake. Any thoughts on that, Randy?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into this particular tournament, what made areas better than the others, because when you're dealing with, early summer, flooded cover like this, it's really a combination of the water visibility and the water depth and how that cover is set up, because a lot of it is not necessarily how the places are positioned on the lake, but it's the type of bush that was on that particular bank that will hold the fish. There are certain bushes when the lake gets flooded that basically hold better fish than other places. It can be the root structure of the bush. It can be, if it sets out a little bit further than like a regular line of bushes, there's something. Each bush has a different level of complexity. So I'm going to guess that Hank landed on a section over there that had that right bush structure, as much as it did with the relationship to how it was put on the lake and the water visibility in it and the proximity to deeper water. the place right here you're showing right here, Johnny, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's like probably one of the most obvious spots on the lake. But that particular area, you can see something like that. It's a good migration area for the bass to move up and down and feed. And like I said, it probably had that right mix of the bush diameter, the leaves as far as they grow, because the leaf structure in correlation with the limb structure has a lot to do with bass using bushes when they're flooded. And it probably had the right depth. Most of the time, the bushes on those peninsulas like that and on the flatter points are going to be a little bit shallower than those points like on the steeper banks and the back end of the cuts. And depending upon the water level and the water clarity, sometimes that makes it a lot better of an area.
For sure. And it's really interesting because if you kind of look at the other areas guys were fishing, it was very similar. So this is Hank Sherry's area. Later in the day, he kind of moved off the peninsula and started moving to some more kind of outside bushes, outside trees, but he was really kind of focused more on this outside edge as opposed to going way back into these bushes or the flooded areas. He kind of found that, like, if you kind of think about it, guys, the way that with the water being up, it's almost like this is the first place these fish are going to move to after they spawn. It's kind of like that first ledge normally. When the lake is normal, a lot of times you'll find those fish moving off of this bush line to the first offshore ledge. But because the lake was so high, they couldn't do that. So if we kind of pull up like a Navionics, here's a similar area. I don't know exactly where Hank was fishing. I knew he was fishing something around here. I don't know exactly where he was at. But let's just say in general you were looking at a lake map, and this might be it here or something like that. But basically you'll have areas where these fish are going to spawn and around these islands and peninsulas. The shad will spawn there, and then after they get done spawning, normally they're going to move off of these areas and move to the first offshore drop that they can find right off of this point. So that might be this shallow little point that sticks out here, dropping from 8 to 10 feet, a shallow little hump out here that drops from 5 to 12 feet. These first drop-offs, a lot of times they're not going to get all the way out to these deeper drops that drop from maybe 12 to 20 feet till later in the summer. They're going to stay on that kind of inside edge in that 5 to 10 foot of water offshore. But what happened in this event is because the lake was so high, that 5 to 10 foot drop off really was happening where the old bank line was. So these fish are basically just in the exact same depth they normally would be this time of year, but because the lake is 5 to 10 feet higher, they're now on the outside bush line as opposed to on that first offshore ledge. So that's something to really pay attention to, guys, is that those fish like to be in the same similar depth a lot of times when the lake is flooded, but they're going to be on visible targets as opposed to being offshore in the middle of the lake. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yep, no doubt on there. There's when you're talking about bushes like that, Johnny, a lot of people think that is like a simple approach. Like that's a simple way to fish. You just go out there and target flooded bushes. That's not the case at all. Bush fishing, it's an art. It's a science in itself. There are so many variables to that, just like you were talking about, that the guys that do well, and like how Hank won this particular tournament, you have to be able to get intimate with the area that you're fishing. And what I mean by that is that when you're working down a row of bushes like they were at the Classic, there's certain ways that each row of bush and each bush needs to be approached. Say, for example, if you're in a real thick, gnarly bush, that's when your big jig may work a little bit better. If you're in one of those bushes that's a little bit sparser, then maybe the Texas Rig Creature bait is going to work better. Then you may come to a set of bushes where there's some good alleyways in it, and that's when you toss, that chatterbait up in there or swim jig or something like that. So you have to, it's almost like a dance. You have to just get into the flow of like knowing when to pick something up, knowing when to put something down. And it's not like you can just pick up a jig in your hand and just go down and fish everything with it. That's why, like Steve Kennedy, the first day of the tournament, he caught that big sack on his big giant, white swim jig, the big 3/4 ounce one that he likes to use. Obviously, that was some type of a shad spawn related bite that went away with him, and he didn't adapt to it. But all of the tournaments I've ever won or done good in flipping flooded bushes, you have to be able to read the water every 5 or 10 feet, and you have to make those adjustments. And those adjustments change during the day. They change with the light intensity. They change with the angle of the sun, how they hit the bush. They change with the wind or lack of wind. They change with subtle water clarity differences. it's a complicated way to fish. A lot of people think that, like fishing offshore structure, deep water offshore electronics is tough. And yeah, there's a science to that too. But I'm here to say that there's just as big of a science to maximizing shallow water flooded cover as there is any other way to fish.
For sure, and a great example of that, guys, is if you take a look at the second place finisher, Matt Airy. He's basically fishing a very similar area to what Hank Cherry was fishing in the beginning of the morning. It's kind of a peninsula that sticks off the bank here. You can't really quite tell in this picture, but if we scroll down a couple more images, you can see this is what he was fishing. It's basically a peninsula, an island that sticks out here, and there's a little bit of a cut right here. And what's interesting is, kind of to Randy's point, if you look at some of these images, here's where, Matt Airy was trying to fish. He's basically fishing this bush line. Well, why isn't he fishing these isolated bushes sticking out here? Or why isn't he way back in this back on some of these flooded bushes over here? There's a million bushes to flip. Everything's flooded. Why is he targeted right here? Well, not only is he just fishing down this bank, he's literally power poled down. You can see in this image, his power poles are stuck in, and he is fishing a very specific area in this. If he wasn't dialed in on where he needed to be fishing on these flooded bushes, he would not be power pulled down. If he was just covering water and it didn't matter which bushes he fished, there's no way he would be stuck in one spot fishing very thoroughly. But obviously, he knew exactly which stretch was going to work. And the same thing happened with Hank Cherry. Hank caught them in the morning, the first couple of mornings on that stretch we showed earlier, and he came back at the end of the day and made some important calls the next day on this key little stretch right here. He knew that this little stretch, this maybe 50-yard stretch, was the deal. None of the other bushes around there mattered. Part of that was probably due to the amount of shad that might be in those areas. He just found a group of fish. But in addition, he was able to figure out, like even in this area, there's this kind of isolated clump that's sticking out here. This is where he was fishing. He was right here and then right in here. This is that little zone where those fish were in. And yeah, part of that was they found it in practice. That probably helps to an extent. But also just understanding that you have to be dialed in on a one little area. One thing I did see that a lot of guys are commenting is that Matt Airy did lose some fish flipping bushes the last day, and it cost him the classic. And that is very typical, Randy. We actually saw that in our challenge. We were doing our flipping challenge. You lost some fish flipping bushes, and I mean that is just the nature of the beast. If you're gonna flip bushes, you're gonna lose big fish, and you just have to accept that as fact.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, some days you get a larger percentage in. A lot of it depends on the type of cover that you're flipping, but ultimately, when you flip a bait into any type of piece of flooded cover, you don't really know how that limb structure is underneath the water. And when that fish bites it, most of the time when you set the hook, the fish has already moved underneath. So your line is sort of like that a lot of times when you set the hook, and it gives this fish a tremendous opportunity to get off with that. So,
Yep.
Another thing about this classic here, I'm just looking at this cover and it's like, man, my mouth's watering just wanting to fish it like that. But, so much of it too, we talked about the bush structure and the location and that type of stuff too. But in order to do good when in this type of a classic, not only you have to figure out the type of cover the fish are using and how they're relating to that cover and how they're positioning in that cover, you have to determine the personality of that bass in that shallow water as far as how much of a mood they are to chase or not to chase. And that has a lot to do with the sinker size you use or the way to jig or how long you leave that bait in there, how quick you work it. There's a lot of variables that you have to hit on. And that's really what separates the guys like Hank Cherry and Airy that did good. They hit upon the maximum amount of those controlled variables possible. And all these other guys that didn't do well, that just didn't come together for them. And there are some unbelievable flippers in that tournament. Matt Heron is, world-class flipper. Of course, you got Cox. You've got a lot of these guys on there that you don't even know that they can flip as good as anybody in the planet. But that's the difference that's the small separation that makes you do good or not do good in a tournament is like that combination of color, weight, line size, casting angle, different retrieves and presentations. There's a lot to it, man. And ultimately it just comes down to who gets the quality bites. And, and then you get into this another philosophical conversation about what makes that happen or doesn't. So, It's fascinating to me, man. It really is. I'm glad to see the classic, in this condition here.
For sure. And just kind of to drive this point home one more time, guys, here's the third place finisher, Scott Canterbury. And one question was over here from Sandy says, he was anchored down in the larger shadowed area. Could it be that simple? And now he was kind of mentioning that, Matt area was power pulled down fishing in the shade. And the shade could definitely be a factor in him power pulled down this area just for the fact that there was a shad spawn going on. But not only is he focused on the shade, you can't just go fish in the shade in any area of the lake and catch fish. That's one thing I think guys try to oversimplify bass fishing too much, where it's like you can't just go to any shaded area in this entire pocket or cove and be catching fish. If you kind of take a look at this, if you think about, a lot of guys are focused on the micro aspect of this, but if you look at the macro aspect, just to give you a pattern here, a perspective, Hank Cherry winning area was, or one of his main areas was a peninsula sticking off the bank here, sticking out more towards the main lake. If we take a look at Matt Aries' area, he's fishing a peninsula sticking off the bank. That's his key deal, further out in the middle of the lake than most anglers. Third place angler, Scott Canterbury, where was he fishing? A peninsula sticking off the bank. So it's like 3 for 3. And yeah, they're probably targeting the shade. Maybe they're targeting deeper bushes, a combination of bushes. And I'm sure that other guys fished through this area. So they were able to utilize a better approach with their baits, a better approach with their techniques. There's a bunch of different things that you can really dial in where or what you could be doing to catch those fish. Maybe you have a different retrieve, like Randy was talking about, different weights, all these different things. But at the end of the day, if you're not around the fish, you're not around the winning caliber fish, it doesn't matter how much better you approach an area with your technique or your bait. If you're not around the winning fish, regardless of how great your technique or your baits are, you're not going to catch the winning fish. You have to be around them. And that's the thing that these guys did. They put all the pieces together. They were fishing the peninsulas, the points sticking out and a little bit further off the bank. They were still shallow. They had the right bait. They were getting it there at the right time. And like Randy mentioned, a lot of that comes down to sometimes just, I don't want to call it luck, but just kind of chance. How would you describe that, Randy?
Then we get into the mystery of the universe. You can go in 100 different directions about what is luck, or does luck exist, or do you create your own luck and your own reality? So there's a lot of different ways that can go into. But one thing, guys, that I think that everybody needs to realize in the classic and the elite series is this type of area that you guys see that the top finishers fish, these peninsulas and like Hank Cherry on the riprap. The only reason that those areas were productive was because of the small field. There's 50 guys in the classic. There's only 80 guys or so in the elite series. If it was a MLF tournament or a Toyota series or a regular or Bassmaster Open, there would have been 25 boats on that riprap where Hank Cherry was. There would have been 15 or 20 boats on every one of those peninsulas. So the guys on the Bassmaster Elite Series, since they fish such a small field, they can fish this obvious stuff. This same type of water that you guys see these tournaments getting won on, like the Bassmasters Classic, I can promise you, if it would have been a Bassmaster Open or a big tournament, these type of areas would not have held up. They only held up because of the small field. In a regular tournament, you would have to capitalize and you would have to look for the much more inobvious cover. You'd have to look for, the subtleties within these flooded bushes. These peninsulas right there, they stick out like a sore thumb, and it'd be a boat show on every single one of them. So that's really what saved Hank Cherry and Airy and all those guys, is the small field on there, because these areas just would not have produced like that in a big tournament.
For sure. Thanks for checking out the video. If you made it this far, we'd really appreciate if you left a like on the video. It helps us out with the YouTube algorithm and gets these videos out to more people. Also consider subscribing. It's free and it lets you get notifications of every single one of our videos that we upload daily. Finally, remember to check out the main Fish the Moment channel, where we actually have on-the-water fishing footage as well as detailed graphics on electronics, offshore fishing, bass behavior, and a lot of other great information. Thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you all in the next one.